I wonder if people know this about LATAM in depth, which actually leads me to my next question, which is that in your time in helping organizations and companies nearshore to LATAM, and with the vast knowledge you all do have about not just a couple of countries but the region in general, what's the most common mistake you've seen companies make in their typically in their first 6 to 12 months of nearshoring?
The biggest mistake is in treating nearshoring as if it's outsourcing but with a different name, right? Companies sometimes very quickly land a site and run it like a vendor contract. That means it operates as a completely different entity, and we've seen it in our experiences as well. But that misses the point, right? They're meant to be an extension of the enterprise. If you don't, for example, build career paths and integrate the culture and build leadership, you will face attrition because the teams will just not relate, right? Which leads me to my second point, which is underinvesting in leadership, right? If you're hiring only the tech talent without which are only junior coding talent, without the leadership, you are basically leaving out a lot of management anchors that you would typically need when you're operating in a cross-border, on-site, offshore, nearshore mix, right? And finally, over-indexing on cost, right? Even though I mentioned cost as a critical lever, if you over-index on it, yes, you'll get 30-40% lower than the US. You will miss the point if you benchmark purely on cost per head, right? So it has to be speed, compliance, and innovation capability, right? So the trap is in thinking short term. Okay, I'm going to save so much. Let me set up something. But that will leave a lot of value on the table that you could potentially have gained through an initiative like building a nearshore center. Malay, you might want to.
If I would just, I completely agree with what Rajeshwar said, but I will present it, one of the points that he mentioned slightly differently. I think many of the enterprises are still trying to see that as a very transactional and tactical initiative, right? And that's the point Rajeshwar mentioned, that, you have to invest in leadership. Under-investment in leadership is a very short-term view. So in the short term, you may get some labor arbitrage, some temporary scale up of the resources. But if you really have to build a practice from a long-term perspective, right, without creating leadership investments, creating innovation hubs, embracing young talent as rookies,
Both the leadership and the bench, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. And that is one of the big things that I think customers are missing out. The other thing I have seen, particularly with customers who are building their captives after having worked in India, or India-centric providers who are building their own centers in Latin America to provide support to customers in the nearshore, are trying to replicate a successful model of one country in a different region. Now, while many of those things align, the cultural gaps are humongous. And many of these companies will take expats coming in from a different part, or I've seen some of the companies, who bring in delivery leaders from India, right, who don't even understand the language, forget the culture, and expect them to create an India kind of a thing, right? So it is a completely new region. The nuances, the work culture, the social culture, how you conduct business, all of them are very different. The local laws, the labor laws, so until unless you understand that, until unless you have the workforce aligned with you, you will face challenges. I know many companies, some of them are much larger than us, but in the same competitive space. They have taken 2, 3, 4 years because they tried the same model, trying to create an India replica here.
Yeah.
And then to make things worse, they will have a delivery come from India, hire a local country manager. It doesn't work, right? One of the big differentiators we see, and one of the reasons why we feel that some of the metrics that we mentioned earlier are on good track, is because almost 100% of our workforce are local people, right? And we have to invest a lot of time in understanding them and they understanding us. It's not like a replica, while a lot of processes can be replicated, the culture cannot be replicated, right? So that's some of the thing I feel companies are missing out. I think I've given a long answer, but if I missed out
No,
anything,
but that's an important point, Malay, and I want to kind of just even though I think we are kind of belaboring this point, but even in choosing your right partner to help build your nearshore, that aspect is extremely important in terms of how do you build that layer of integration between your organizations. How do you advise your customers about not just looking beyond the short term cost advantages? How do you help them, guide them in building the leadership talent, local leadership talent? How do you ensure that the processes are all aligned between nearshore and all and offshore and on-site? Because you're working across multiple teams, right? And that really makes or breaks a good successful nearshore center. In addition, how do you ensure that the pipeline of the rookie pool or the young STEM graduates coming in, because bear in mind that when they come in, they learn, they use the opportunity to learn, and they also are very excited about contributing, right? So you get a very motivated bunch of people guided by the right leadership. That's a recipe for success. I think we've both of us are really passionate about
important point. This is a very important question Arjun
yeah.
asked. See, Arjun, one practical thing, when you see things very tactically, there are many of our customers who will have a project team of 12, 14 people, and one person will be from LATAM, 9 will be sitting in India, 1 will be sitting in somewhere in Europe or US. That individual sitting in the local region never gets integrated to the larger organization. Right? So bringing in leadership is the first point, and everything else aligns with that.
That's a great point. Actually, I love how I think you'll use the words recipe, and I think that's the whole point, right? It's not just a mix of ingredients. Just having the ingredients on the table is not going to get the job done. It's about the process as well as putting those things together. And I think that's a really useful thing for companies to hear or to think about if they've not done that already.